What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day Podcast Happy Hour. Of course, I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks for being here. Hit me up with your questions. Obviously, I'll get to any super chats as soon as they come in, but as soon as you guys have questions, I'll start answering them. Now, it's been a little bit of a long week. Well, first of all, it feels like forever since Thursday Night Football, and I think we've all dissected to death the issues in the run game, the issues on the defensive side of the ball. And you start hearing this stuff over and over and over. And of course, as Austin mentions, David Bakhtiari announces he's officially out for the season, which we basically knew, but we're just waiting that confirmation. And it starts to feel like, oh my goodness, this is like the longest week ever. Packers play the Raiders on Monday Night Football. As far as I saw, I think Bill Huber posted they went from being favorites to underdogs. And it's just like, my goodness, I think we all need a drink of something. I'm just going orange kickstart at this point. But yeah, it's sort of just been one of those weeks. But I think one of the big things to remember is that as much as this team is a roller coaster and we're going to have those really high highs and those really low lows, it's going to be one of those things where as a fan, like it's hard not to follow that, where it's like, oh my goodness, when we see all of these really fun and amazing things happen and a comeback against the Saints and a beat down to the Bears, where it's really hard not to be really high and be like, oh my goodness, this is potentially a playoff team and they're this young and they haven't even had all their guys yet. And then it feels really great. And then on the flip side, when they have the fourth quarter collapse against the Falcons and they play like crap for 3 quarters against the Saints and 4 quarters against the Lions, it's really hard not to be like, oh my goodness, this team is the worst, fire everybody. It's a nightmare. And when reality is, it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? So I think it's one of those things. I still have a lot of optimism and hope for this team. I think they're going to continue to get better. I think this specific time period off from Thursday Night Football to Monday Night Football is going to be super beneficial. We got pretty good news overall on the injury report. We already knew Devondre Campbell was going to be out this week. He didn't practice, but both Rudy Ford and John Runyon Jr. come back from injury, at least practiced in some capacity. So we'll see what ultimately the injury report looks like as we get closer and closer to the game. That'll be on Saturday when we get that final injury report. But still, it feels, I think, just getting some of those guys back and practicing, you could have a world where, again, we know Bakhtiari is going to be out. We'll talk about that in just a second. But Devondre Campbell might be out. Zane Anderson might be out. And that's it. And we'll see with Stokes, too. I was talking to Wes Hodkiewicz today at practice. I'm like, there's not a chance that Stokes actually plays. He looks really good. I think, and Wes brought up a great point when I asked him, he's like, if his major injury issue was done in camp and it was just the hamstring that flared up and that was the reason why he was sitting out the past 3 weeks, then maybe there is a world where they activate Eric Stokes. I still think it's probably more likely the following week after the bye, but that's a really interesting question as well. So this team is getting healthier and healthier, knock on wood. I know the Bakhtiari news sucks, but overall, you could go into this game that besides Bakhtiari and Tenuta, who are on IR, and Tyler Davis, of course, like you could just be, Devondre Campbell and Zane Anderson down in this game. So we'll see. It'll be an interesting injury report to say the least, but it does seem like they're getting closer to health for maybe really the first time this season. As far as Austin, thoughts on Dave's interview, I was not in the locker room when it happened. I'll start by saying that. I saw some of the tweets come out. The biggest takeaway here is his comment about, I got all of Brian's FaceTime messages is legitimately hilarious. Like that is really, really hilarious. But outside of that, he confirmed what we knew already. Rappaport reported he had a knee scope and was going to have another knee surgery, which was going to knock him out, and that his hope was to be ready for training camp next year. And David Bakhtiari comes out and says he hopes to be ready for training camp next year and that this season is done with. It's a brutal blow for everyone. It sucks for the team. It sucks for him. It's the same thoughts we've had this entire time. It just sucks all the way around. And I know like some of the questions came up already of like, all right, what does that mean for Bakhtiari next year? He clearly wants to remain a Green Bay Packer, at least per his comments. And I do believe him. I legitimately believe him. I do think Green Bay is going to have a very difficult decision to make on that. To me, there is 0.0% chance that Green Bay has any want or desire to keep him on the contract that he's on right now. He's going to get paid $19 million in salary or in bonus. Let me rephrase that. He's been paid through signing bonus $19 million already that will count against the salary cap next year. Nothing you can do with it. Absolutely nothing you can do with it. They have another $21 million that they could theoretically save. The reason I say theoretically is because there can be a situation where if he's not healthy and they release him and he never is able to play, you could run into some really disgusting, I say disgusting from a Packers standpoint, but like some just gross situations where you could still have to pay him the entirety or at least close to his contract because you would be releasing him injured. And that gets into a really messy situation. So there is a world in which they're just stuck with the entire 40 million on the salary cap next year. Who knows where it will get to, and we'll have all offseason to discuss that. The first thing is he needs to be back healthy 100%. And then if they get to that point, then Green Bay basically has three options. And the three options would be the three R's. A, he could retire. And if he's fully healthy, then I don't think that's going to be the case. He's going to want to play. So I think you can basically rule that one out unless something else goes wrong, which we can't rule out at this point, but based on how this saga has gone. The other is release. And again, you can only basically want to release him if he is actually healthy and there's not going to be that grievance that would go against Green Bay for releasing him injured and then that whole nightmare, or it's restructure. And that would be probably what I think is the most likely situation and scenario, is that he restructures in some capacity. And by restructuring, he's still going to get the 19 million guaranteed, and he's already got it. It's just going to be, that's going to count against the cap no matter what. And now maybe you do a completely incentive laden contract where it makes sense for both sides. And we'll see. It's going to be, it's very funny. We have 69 people in the chat right now, which is just fitting that we're talking about David Bakhtiari. But now we're up to 75. I have to pivot to Brian Bulaga. But it's going to be a crazy saga and how that ultimately happens. In an ideal world, they figure out a restructure. He plays. He finishes his career as a Packer. He plays amazing next year. He helps the team. And this is all behind him. I know everyone just wants to jump to get rid of him. If you release him now, you have that whole grievance process, which you do not want to have. Right now, there's no benefit to releasing him. There's 0.0% benefit to releasing him. None. He's not taking up a roster spot. You're not saving a single dime. In fact, you might be costing yourself more money by releasing him injured than by potentially releasing him later if he does clear all the, health checks and everything like that. So there's, again, 0.0% chance you release him right now. And there's zero savings if you were to do so. So you just wait until the offseason, figure out if he gets healthy. And then if he's fully healthy, then you have that decision to make. So it's an offseason question, but the biggest thing here is just everything sucks about it. Everything sucks about it. That is what it is. Frosty, do you think we will sign James Robinson? No, I do not, simply because they had him in for a workout. They worked out 4 people. They signed the inside linebacker as the practice squad guy. And I think James Robinson, could you bring him in as a practice squad guy? Sure. This is a player who had a pretty significant Achilles injury and was never the same after it. He signed, or they traded him to the Jets, if memory serves. He signed with the Patriots. He's been around. Teams have tried him out, and teams don't even want to use a practice squad spot on him at this point. If you're going to bring in a running back to the practice squad, bring in a 22, 23-year-old who hasn't had an Achilles injury. You're probably better off that way. And if they brought him in and they did not sign him, it's not worth it. So I think they would have done it already if they had planned to do it. So he was so fun as an undrafted free agent in Jacksonville. Sometimes this is apparently just going to be a talk of all injuries episode today, or a happy hour today. But sometimes you get those injuries and they just return as not the same people. And unfortunately, that's been the case for James Robinson so far. Alex, let's hope we don't have to discuss it, but how bad would the Packers have to be for Matt LaFleur to be on the hot seat next year? I mean, you're probably talking about, anything 6 wins or less, it at least becomes more in the conversation. I think 7 wins or more was within the expectation for what this team was going to be, but anything 6 or less is at least like kicking off that conversation a little bit more. I think more of what you want to look at is, and I talked about this, so tomorrow's episode is going to be with Ben Fennell. I recorded it earlier today, but I think if you do start having seasons where you win 6 games or less, now the pressure just heats up. The talk of, is it Goody? Is it LaFleur? And just the heat picks up on everything. And I think that's why they could potentially be more active in free agency next year, even though from a money and monetary standpoint, they're going to have some salary cap issues still. But if they want to make sure that team is structured in a place where they can win more football games next year, they're going to probably have to maybe start borrowing again. I don't think that's what they should do, but if the heat picks up on Goody and LaFleur, they're going to see the writing on the wall and be like, oh, a refresh or a rebuild or a reboot or whatever you want to call it sounds nice. But if you can't win games, again, the pressure comes very, very quickly. So we'll see. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. But if things got really, really bad, it could start, sooner rather than later. I don't think it's going to get quite that bad to be to that point after this season, Alex. Packers clan. Do you think this is the week the Packers introduce Jonathan Ford? Maybe, but probably not. Probably not. I think they probably go elsewhere with that, with the practice squad spots this week, and probably focus on special teams. Could they? Yes. Should they? Maybe. But until I see it, I probably won't believe it. But it's within the realm of possibility. Glenn, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. You're the absolute best. Appreciate you a ton. Captain Quint, and thank you for this chat, is reason for optimism around the defense moving forward? That's a really good question. Rashawn Gary is probably number one, and that's probably another contract that you want to get done sooner rather than later. His usage rate and pressure percentage, like the fact that he's getting as many pressures as he is and playing so little, is unbelievable. I mean, he is legitimately looking like one of the best defensive players in all of football. Now, can he continue that with a full workload of snaps and 50, 60 snaps, whatever he needs to play? That will remain to be seen. But I think that's the biggest reason for optimism, is that you have a big time player. I think unquestionably, when healthy, the Packers' best player on the roster right now. That's where I would put him. So that's the biggest reason for optimism. I think the other is that you still have a lot of youth and potential on that squad. There's not much like, all right, so what do you potentially lose in the offseason? Let's look at it that way. Rudy Ford, free agent. Darnell Savage, free agent. That's and Jonathan Owens, whatever. Like, safety needs to be remade anyway. So you're not going to lose anything there. You're getting Stokes back at some point. You've got Carrington Valentine. You've got Jair Alexander. The Rasul Douglas conversation is a bit interesting. I actually proposed to Paul Brettel this week of like, maybe if Stokes comes in and plays well and you like Valentine and you like Jair and you like Nixon, maybe you start looking at, hey, does a contending team want to trade something of value for Rasul? Because his contract's a little bit interesting next year. He's probably not exactly on the timeline as the rest of the roster. I really like Rasul. I think he's playing really good football overall. So, but I think you at least maybe take the phone calls if some teams start calling. But I think, overall, the corner position is, you've got the players there that you need. You could lose Devondre, but he's been out anyway. You probably need to address that linebacker spot if you do lose him, and it would be a release. But Quay Walker is still young and upcoming. Preston Smith has not had his best season so far. I've kind of jokingly said the next play we see from Preston Smith will be his best play of the season, because we just haven't seen all that much from him. You still have young players in Enigbare, Rashawn Gary, obviously LVN, Brenton Cox. So there's still some depth and talent there. The defensive line, you're still, going to have Wyatt and Clark and Slayton and Wooden and Brooks. So it's a young team. You're not losing a ton. They just have to start playing more team football. A lot of times it looks like 11 individual players playing defense rather than a team of players playing cohesively. I think that's something that needs to change. But I would start with Rashawn Gary and then say you're not at risk of really losing anything of value in the near future. And the hope is that some of these players start really playing at a much higher level. All right. Doug says no beer in the house. He's having a glass of wine. That is more than acceptable. Doug, no judging. Like I said, I just got a kickstart today. I needed more energy than I needed alcohol today, which is not always the case on Fridays, but today that was definitely the case. I recorded, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes on Wednesday of stuff. I think 3 episodes Wednesday. I did 2 or 3 more yesterday. I did 2 today. Like I literally got to the point, because usually I try to, if I'm wearing something, I try to change it up so I'm not wearing the same thing for multiple episodes. As I started this today, there was like a minute left before the stream started. I had to think back. I'm like, I have no idea what I wore when I was recording any of my episodes this week. But tomorrow I'll be wearing this exact same thing when you see Ben Fennell's episode, because I didn't even think of it until I hit start. That's where I'm at with my week, is I don't even know what I wore when or any of that. So I needed an energy drink, to say the least. All right, Ryan, thanks so much for being a member. What's your prediction for Elton and Stokes coming back post-bye, or is there a chance for Monday? I think there's a legitimate chance for Jenkins on Monday, and I think they will give him every opportunity to play in that game. They know they need that offensive line together and playing as best as they possibly can. Stokes, we just talked about a little bit. I don't know. I think there is an outside chance I don't expect it. I probably wouldn't do it. I'd probably give him through the bye, but I definitely think it's at least within the realm of possibility a little bit. So that'll be one to keep an eye on. But I would put Elton before Stokes. You could tell me neither plays, both play, one of them plays, and it could go in any direction. But I definitely think they're going to try everything they can to have Elton play in that game. John, thanks so much for being a member as well. What player who almost became a Packer stung for you the most? Randy Moss, Tony Gonzalez, Marshawn Lynch, or another? Those are all really good ones. I think Tony Gonzalez at the time was one that stung a lot. The Randy Moss situation was it looked like it was going to get done. And then so to have it like almost like pulled from underneath you was a really tough one. Wasn't there one time too where like somebody reported that the Packers were trading for Vince Wilfork and then it was like a fake account or something, or maybe they reported he retired. I don't know. There was something there too. Marshawn Lynch was another one. Like all of those stung to some degree. That was like the end of the Ted Thompson era. At least some of that was. And you were just like, you wanted him to add somebody and it just kept not happening, even though there was all the rumors of it. So all of those stung to different levels. I don't know that there's one that but I think Gonzalez, because it almost felt like it was going to really get done at the trade deadline and then just didn't. So that one sucked. No question about it. All right, just change hats, Gary. Yeah, I probably should. I have a bunch of them. I could have just changed out hats and at least it would have looked slightly different. Captain Quint, thanks so much again. What needs to change in this organization so that we can finally become a physically imposing team? A lot, unfortunately. I think the first thing is that you have to prioritize a physical level of player when you're drafting and developing these players. Man, this is such a deep question because the first one is the players. Now, do I think that this team is a team made up of entirely soft players that don't know how to play physical football? I don't. I really don't. But I do think that on defense, they've prioritized more pass stopping specialists, whether it's pass rushers, cover corners, linebackers who can get sideline to sideline and actually cover tight ends and running backs to some level and extent. I think they've prioritized those sort of players. If you look at Green Bay's defense overall, you can argue Kenny Clark is maybe a little bit more of a run defender than he is a pass defender. That was a Ted Thompson pick. And then it starts getting really hard. You could argue Rudy Ford is more of a run defender than a pass defender. You could argue that one. Other than that, it's really tough to look at anyone and be like, this is more, I guess, Devondre Campbell, maybe a little bit, but pretty much everyone else that they've prioritized on defense has been a more pass-oriented player than a run-oriented player. On the offensive side of the ball, you look at how they make up the offensive line. That's really what you kind of want to look at. You don't mind that your running backs are, playmakers, your receivers are playmakers, even your tight ends to some extent, you don't, care that much of their playmakers. But if you want to be physical, it has to happen in the trenches. And Bakhtiari is a really good all-around offensive lineman, but he's still not what you would consider a mauler. At left guard, Elton Jenkins, really good left guard, not what you would consider a mauler. Center, Josh Myers, I think the reason they took him over Creed Humphrey was they thought maybe he would be a bit more physical. We don't need to get into all of that, but that has not been the case so far. And he is by far and away not a mauler. At right guard, John Runyon Jr., not a mauler. Right tackle, Zach Tom, really good right tackle, not a mauler. These are not movers in the running game. So you get what you prioritize. And Green Bay has prioritized pass protection on the offensive line and pass rush and pass defense on the defense. Inherently, that's not always the worst thing. It's really, really difficult to get players on both sides to be great at everything. Usually, in the most cases, they're either good at, pass offense, pass defense, run defense. It's hard to find players that are great at everything. That being said, when you're spending 8 first-round picks on defenders, you're hoping to have a handful of more players who are really great at all of it. And Green Bay doesn't have that. Kenny Clark's probably the closest. Rashawn, when he focuses on run defense and when he gets to play, he hasn't played much run defense this year, but when he focuses on it, he can be good enough at it. Eventually, the hope is that LVN can play both, but we just need to see something from him at this point. But, they don't have much to show as far as like really good or great players that are great in all facets. So in that case, you're sort of compromising. All right, what are they going to be good at? So I think it starts from what you want in your players when you're drafting players, signing players. Then it gets to, all right, what kind of coach did you hire? And I think the thing of like Matt LaFleur being soft, that Matt LaFleur to me is not a soft coach. He's just not. I see him in practice. He will get after players. He'll get after media from time to time, as we've seen. He will get, he is a X's and O's coach. He will be a hands-on coach when he needs to be. And like, that's some of my favorite stuff when I watch Matt LaFleur is when he is hands-on. That's like every practice that we see in training camp. He is a hands-on coach that will talk with any player at any position on something that they can do better. So yeah, I don't think there's anything, soft about that. But if you had to say of like, is Matt more of a intimidator, like your Dan Campbell or somebody that's just going to be like, this team's going to run through your face? Or is it more of like hey, we're going to scheme some things up to outsmart the other team? I think he leans more on that side of things. And then again, it goes to your positional coaches, it goes to the players, it goes to the demeanor, it goes to all of that. So I think organizationally, this is a team that when they had Aaron Rodgers as quarterback, they focused more on, hey, let's get pass defenders because we're going to put up a ton of points. And let's get pass blockers because we've got freaking Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And during that time, you had a league that went far more to we need lighter, faster, quicker guys that can, work, guys that can pass protect on offense and play make on offense and stop the faster, quicker guys on defense. And now we're starting to see, and this is why the NFL is always a pendulum where everyone goes super small and everyone has undersized outside linebackers and undersized inside linebackers and safeties who should be corners and linebackers who should be safeties. And everyone's undersized because on offense, you were just getting killed with speed. So everyone now is undersized on defense. And what do the offenses do? Oh, you're undersized and you're playing two safeties deep. Awesome. We're the San Francisco 49ers, and we're going to get Trent Williams, and we're going to have George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk as our playmakers on the inside. We're going to smash mouth football with Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Juszczyk and a huge offensive lineman, and we're going to smash it right down your throat. Philadelphia Eagles, very similar. And now all of a sudden, the teams that are in vogue are the teams that are being able to run the ball and be more physical on offense. And what's going to happen? Defenses will adjust. And now you'll see safeties creep closer to the line. And you're going to see teams that are starting to stack up players who are more physical, dominant, imposing run defenders and physical players. And then what's going to happen? It's going to swing back to the opposite side. And that's what makes things in the NFL really hard. But to answer your question in a very elongated way, it's an organizational structure and decision. And you can understand why they've got there to this point. And there's no one perfect way to make a football team. You can win in the NFL with fast, quick, pass protecting, pass blocking, playmaking, pass defending players. You just have to really be good at attention to detail and scheme and making sure that you're assignment sure, because it's not going to be easy to get off those blocks and go make plays. You have to be a team that's playing cohesive 11-man football, all playing at the same speed, at the same pace, knowing what each other are going to do. And with a young team, it's really hard to do that. So a million different ways that we could go with that answer. But right now it's organizationally and structurally, I would say more of a finesse team and more of a team that wants to out scheme you and outsmart you than punch you in the face. That's where I would say right now. All right, Alex, thanks so much for this. How good does defense need to be for Barry to be back next year, or how bad to be fired mid-season? The first step towards a Joe Barry termination in season would be him giving up another 200 plus rushing yards and 400 plus yards this week against the Raiders. This Raiders team just is not good. They can't run the football. They can't pass the football. Just don't let Davante Adams beat you. And we don't even know 100% if he's going to play. I would expect that he will, but don't let Davante Adams beat you. And you're in very good shape. And even if Adams does beat you, even if he gets his 180 yards, you still feel kind of okay of like limiting everyone else to like 70. So, that's where you're at. This cannot be another defensive collapse where the defense is just letting the Raiders do anything and everything on Monday Night Football in primetime. That would be the first step. And maybe, I don't think the final step, but that would be the first step to like really Green Bay is going to have to start having some real serious conversations here as if this is the right direction to go in moving forward. That would be step one. And then if it continued to get worse from there, then in season is very much in play. As far as how we'd have to do to keep his job, that's a really tough thing to answer, because I think a part of this is how, injuries have played a huge part in Green Bay's defensive struggles. The other thing is that you can look at like the Lions is really the first bad defensive game that you really can't make any argument for in a while. You go back to last year. I want to pull this up really quick. I noted this the other day. And some of these were really bad opponents. I get that. We can put the asterisk of, the Bears and some of the teams that Green Bay played at the end of last year and those sort of things. We can definitely talk about that as well. But if you go back to last season and Joe Barry's defense, and again, I am not defending Joe Barry. I said I would have moved on in the offseason. I thought they had the opportunity to do so, and they did not. So I'm not saying that they should or shouldn't. But the tough thing here for Green Bay is you go back to last season, at the end of last year, and then so far in this season, and you look at like the points allowed and how this defense has performed. And sorry, it's taking me forever to get to last year. All right, 2022. So after the Philadelphia game where they gave up 40, this was the remainder of last season. They gave up 19 to Chicago, 12 to the Rams, 20 to the Dolphins, 17 to the Vikings, and 20 to the Lions. The most points that they allowed for the remainder of the season was 20 points twice against the Dolphins and against the Lions. So just to recap that one more time, 19, 12, 20, 17, and 20. Those are the points allowed. Those are really good defensive performances through the last 5 weeks of the last season. This year, you come back and you can point to 20 points against the Bears, but that's another 20-point performance. Then they allowed 25 to Atlanta, which we can all agree, not good enough. But it's not like it was like guys, the Broncos just allowed 70. They just allowed 70. So we're not talking about like 48-point performance here. It was 25. And was that good enough against the Falcons team that has been really abysmal, especially the last 2 weeks? No, but it's 25. We're not talking about 30s, 40s, 50s, 70s. It was 25. The Saints, they allowed 17. 7 of those was a punt return for a touchdown. They allowed 10. And then it was finally Detroit. First time in a 9-week period that they allowed any team to get over 25 points. And only the second time they allowed a team to get over 20. And the offense in that game was abysmal. So, I mean, again, I'm not here sitting defending Joe Barry. I'm not saying raise the Joe Barry banner, this guy's a hero or any of that. I'm just saying if you get to the talk of like firing a coach, especially in season, it usually needs to be egregious. And I will say, like, there are some things you can point to that say, like, hey, they've had a lot of key injuries on defense. The offense has not done their share. There's not been any form of complementary football. The defense has been on the field a ton. And all things considered, where they're at, it's not like the worst in the world. So we could go back and forth on this forever. I don't think there's anything yet to be egregious enough to be like, he's out, done, finished. And I will very much also say, hey, as much as I don't think like Joe Barry is the complete problem, we can also, I think, all agree that overall it hasn't looked good enough. There have been some, head scratching decisions. The 4 guys or the cover 4 shell on a 3rd and 1 play, some of the stuff that they're doing in goal line situations, it's nauseating. It's frustrating. I get it. So I don't know if they play more like they have, over the last 9 games, then yeah, there's a world in which he could be back. It's going to be dependent upon the remainder of this year, how they play from an attitude standpoint. Can they actually stop the run? There's a lot to it, but right now I don't think he does make it. I don't think he gets fired during the season. I think they probably do look to go in a different direction in the offseason, but that's why the rest of the season, is going to be very interesting. All right, Vex, thank you so much. Can you expand upon why Mike Wall said attitude-wise the Lions head coach is his preference over Matt LaFleur? Dan Campbell comes off as a bit crazy, but I love how the Lions play. Thanks for everything, Andy. Appreciate you, Vex. I mean, I don't want to put words in Mike Wall's mouth by any stretch of the imagination, but what I will say is you can tell the attitude and the physicality that these two teams play with. And this is where you have to marry, and this is something I talked about with Ben Fennell today, you have to marry up your physicality and your players with your scheme and your attitude. And when you get a team like the 49ers and the Eagles and those sort of teams that play with a level of physicality, play with great scheme and have great players, you win a lot in the NFL. It just is what it is. You win in the trenches, you play smart football, analytically driven with a great scheme and really good players, you're going to win a lot of football games. So I think what, we're seeing in Detroit right now is a team that's head coach sets the attitude and the tone for the team. That what you're getting with a Dan Campbell coach team. Period. End of story. I'm not saying he's like the, greatest coach of all time or anything, but he sets the attitude. And then you've got 2 very good coordinators in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, who are doing, I think, a lot of the heavy lifting from a scheme standpoint. And they've done a phenomenal job on both of those sides of the ball to make things work where they can worry more about scheme. Campbell's the guy that's setting the attitude. And then on the From a player standpoint, this has been a team that's been drafting early for a while. They've got some really good players. Penei Sewell is phenomenal. Their first 4 draft picks this year. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think they probably even want to see more from, moving forward, but that 1-2 punch with Montgomery's been pretty darn good. Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Sam Laporta, like that's a really good draft too. So you're starting to combine a team that's got some pretty damn good football players with a head coach that sets the tone, with 2 coordinators that are figuring it out from a scheme and analytical standpoint. That's, again, you're marrying together intensity and attitude with scheme, with really good players. You're going to win a lot of football games in the NFL. And I think that's probably what he's talking about, a little bit of, yeah, you know what? Campbell might be a little bit over the top from time to time. There's zero question as to what you're getting from an attitude standpoint with that football team. And it's shown. The Lions 4-0 against the Packers in their last 4 games, eliminating the Packers from the playoffs last year, taking control of the NFC North this year. It's been, advantage Dan Campbell over the past 4 games against those 2 teams. All right, Rob, thank you so much. Favorite under the radar Packers player ever? Under the radar. Ooh, that's a really good question, Rob. I might have to come back to that. I mean, some of my favorite players ever, Tramon Williams, Sam Shields, Amon Green, Nick Collins, Charles Woodson. Those are like my all-time favorite Green Bay Packers. But under the radar ones, William Henderson's another one who was just a joy to watch, and how he played the game as a fullback. And it was a dying breed even at the time. That was another one that is probably a little bit under the radar. I still don't think Santana Dotson and Sean Jones even too get anywhere near the credit that they deserve for how great they were on that defensive front. A lot of times it feels like Reggie White, and understandably so, gets like 95% of the credit. And then like Gilbert Brown and the Gravedigger and everything, which is still amazing, gets so much of the credit. And it does feel like sometimes that Santana Dotson and Sean Jones get overlooked, and they were just both fantastic football players as well. I'm trying to think of anyone else who comes to mind off the top of my head. I think far more often than not, some offensive linemen. Mike Flanagan's a guy and Mike Wall brings that up all the time as well. He goes so under the radar and deserves a lot more praise. Mike Wall and Marco Rivera, those guys deserve more praise as well, I think, for their play on the offensive line. I'm trying to go through position by position. I think a player who I understand why they don't get the credit they deserve because of the way that they left and the way they've sort of talked about the team afterwards. But I think people are quick to forget just how amazing Greg Jennings was in his prime. He would that was a all-time favorite Andy player when he was in Green Bay. He was a joy to watch. It was never anything insanely flashy, but just always open, always getting explosive plays, run after the catch. He was a perfect fit for that Packers offense and the McCarthy offense. Played well with Favre, played well with, Rodgers. That's another one that, again, I understand why after the fact and just his persona after, but during the time was phenomenal. Yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head of some of my favorite guys. I don't know if any of those would really be considered under the radar, but those are the ones that came to my head. Appreciate the question and the super chat there, Rob. Captain Quint, you were on a roll today. What's the biggest difference in temperament between 12 and 10? Removing skill and experience, can Love be a better leader than Rodgers? Yeah, I think, quite honestly, I think you probably know the answer to this. I don't think I even probably need to spell this out. The demeanor is 1,000,000% different. Rodgers is going to be the fiery guy who's going to get after people, throw them under the bus, give them the glare of death. And, he had a extremely high demand for what he expected out of the players on the field. And that's just who Aaron was. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or ugly. That's just what it was out on the field. For me personally, and my favorite Aaron Rodgers, let me maybe put it differently. My favorite Aaron Rodgers was the Aaron Rodgers that was having fun. And the belt Aaron Rodgers, I almost felt like there was a transition when the belt died, sincerely. The belt Aaron Rodgers was a confident Aaron Rodgers who was running all around the field, playing like he knew he was going to assassinate every team he played every single week. And he was just out there having fun. And you didn't see so much of the pointing fingers and the glare of death and all of that. And then it was really right around the time he stopped doing the belt and Jordy got hurt and teams single press manned, single high safety press man, extra guy in the box. And Green Bay didn't have guys to get outside, get off of coverage on the outside. And that was when Jordy tore his ACL. I remember it to this day. I was at the game. It was Rams, Packers. The Rams were not a good football team at all. The Packers were, I think, 14-point favorite, huge favorites going into that game. And I get there. And remember, every team played two safeties high against Green Bay at the time because nobody would dare play single high safety because Aaron Rodgers would just kill you down the field with his deep ball accuracy. And the Rams come out in that game. Again, this is the Jordy Nelson ACL season. And I'm sitting in the north end zone, and like very first play, Rams are in single high. Rodney McLeod is in single high for the Rams. And I'm like, oh, good night, nurse. This is going to be a very fun game. The Packers are just going to boat race the Rams because you can't play single high against Aaron. You can't play single high against Aaron when he's got Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings on the outsides and easy separation on the outside. Green Bay, as we all know, once Jordy went down, didn't have anyone to separate on the outside. And so now all of a sudden you've got these wide receivers struggling against press man on the outside, a single high in the middle of the field, an extra guy playing down in the box, both to stop the run and to take all the middle of the field away. And there was nowhere for Aaron to go with the football. He would try to buy time. And that's all of a sudden where we got to Aaron trying to do too much at the line of scrimmage, his eyes dropping down, a lot of throwaways. And then we saw all of that. And that's, to me, when he stopped kind of having fun. And all of a sudden, like, now he was just kind of ticked off at everyone because everyone around he knew what he was still capable of, but now everything around him wasn't quite the same. So for Aaron, to me, my favorite Aaron was the one that was having fun, doing the belt, had the players around him, which is important too. And then it almost got to a different stage where it was just a totally different feel. And it doesn't mean he wasn't successful. He won 2 MVPs after that. Green Bay should have had more success from a playoff standpoint, but that was my favorite Aaron. Now, as far as Jordan, much more calm, quiet demeanor, easygoing, poised, calm, collected, leads by example. You can tell this whole team has his back. That's not to say that it's better or worse, or it's just different. And it's interesting to see the two different styles. I think Jordan's style probably works better for this young team that is really learning with and alongside Jordan Love. You could see it last year where there was just a disconnect between Aaron and what he wanted with the Cobbs and the Lewises and the Tunyons and the Lazards. And then like Green Bay trying to go in this different direction with the Watsons and the Dobbs and everyone else. So it's different, but like I said, I think you can kind of see that out on the field. And I don't know that necessarily they're different leadership styles. So we'll see how it plays out. And if Loves can work for this team, I'm confident from what I've seen so far, but I would just say different at this point. All right, Dylan, who have been your favorite players to grade on offense and defense this year? That's another really great question. You guys are having great questions today. Favorite players to grade on offense and defense. On defense, Quay has been fun to grade from a just pure piquing my interest standpoint. There's stuff that you're seeing from Quay that's really, really fun, and he's playing so much faster than he was a year ago. There's stuff from Quay that you're seeing that's still super frustrating and still some of the mistakes from a season ago. So Quay Walker is definitely one, just from like what Quay Walker are we going to see this week standpoint, that always piques my interest. Carl Brooks is another that is really intriguing to watch and grade. There's so much to like about him, but he's still so young and raw, struggles in run defense a little bit, but he's another one that I'm really enjoying watching closer. On the offensive side of the ball, Zach Tom. Zach Tom's already becoming a technician at the position, and he is a joy to watch play the game. Had a tough week last week. You could tell he was battling that injury. And when I say a tough week for him, he had like a average level game, like it was almost a 0.0 grade for him last week, which is down for him. But still, you could tell he was battling through that injury. And I love watching him play. I'm trying to think of Dontavian Wicks has been fun to watch so far. So yeah, I would say those are ones that, and then of course, Jordan Love. Like Jordan Love is really, really fun because you can see him in real time, like just becoming this starting caliber quarterback. And like, it's almost like when I say this, it's going to have a connotation. I don't mean it that he's going to just tear through the league, but it's almost like a superhero who's learning to use his powers. And I don't know what those powers are going to end up being, or if he's going to end up being a really good superhero or one that's like, 10,000 on the list of Marvel superheroes that are out there that you don't really care about, but you can see him in real time, like figuring out what can I do? And can I even be better? Can I get away with even more? And it's kind of fun just to watch that. I think this past week was a great example of early in the game when, JT O'Sullivan calls it like, what did he say? Just basically like not taking the easy stuff, like turn downs, I think is what O'Sullivan called it, like turning down some easy reads, a quick slant here, or just a quick check down there, and turning down some of the easy stuff. You saw him turn down some easy stuff this past week because over the first 3 weeks of the season, his offensive line gave him time and he knew he could get to the second, third, fourth, fifth read. So I think against Detroit, he had this level of confidence of like, all right, I could throw this like 5-yard slant here, but I also know that Musgrave's running an out and up. And if I can go to that second read and he got open, we're going to hit an explosive and I know I'm going to have time. But he didn't have time. And the Lions defense beat the crap out of the Packers front. And all of a sudden he was getting sacked over and over. And I thought he made those adjustments as the game went along, but that's just the growth that you're seeing from Jordan. And he's figuring out, what can I get away with? When do I have to take the easy stuff? When do I have to find my checkdowns? When can I scramble? But you're seeing him develop that in real time, which has been really, really fun to watch. So those are probably my favorites. And I think Love would easily be on the top of that list so far. All right, Cheddarhead, thank you so much. Been to a few Packer Raiders games, but this is the first one I'm not worried about getting stabbed in the parking lot. Should I wear my 23 or 10 jersey? Yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit different in Vegas. I rode Packer games. I've only been to the old Metrodome. Actually, I've been at the old Viking Stadium and the new Viking Stadium. Oh, no, that's not true. All right, I was at the old Viking Stadium and the new Viking Stadium. I was in St. Louis when the Packers played the Rams in St. Louis, and I was in the Falcon Stadium maybe 8-9 years ago when the Packers played the Falcons in Atlanta. Those are my only road games I've ever been to. I've always felt safe and never had an issue, but I do know, like, I don't think I would ever go to like Philadelphia and watch an Eagles game as like a road fan. Just no thanks. Certain situations I just have no interest in. I think you got to wear your 23 this week because the marquee matchup is Jair versus Adams. Like, that is it. It's going to be so fun to watch as an NFL fan. So I think you got to go Jair this week. Good question, though. Amy, thank you so incredibly much. Really appreciate you becoming a new YouTube member. If you guys have not checked out YouTube memberships yet, a couple things that you get: a weekly Q&A. And obviously it depends on what tier you sign up for. There's a variety of different things that you can do. But if you sign up Pro Bowl or higher, two of the big perks is you're getting a weekly Q&A with just members. So you have a lot more opportunities to ask questions and get them answered. You know, we usually go for about 30 to 40, actually about 45 minutes for our members only Q&A. Yesterday I had to cancel, had an emergency situation with my kiddo, but I'm going to be rescheduling that likely for tomorrow. So if you haven't yet signed up, sign up now. You get to be a part of that Q&A tomorrow. Also, you're getting a weekly commercial-free members-only video, and that is up. I just posted mine, 42 minutes ago or right around there. So that's another thing that you're getting. Today's episode was about Sean Ryan versus Royce Newman, and is it time to go to Sean Ryan? Went through Ryan's full scouting report from when I scouted him right after the Packers drafted him. Went through what I saw in training camp and in preseason. Also went through why I think Green Bay may have gone with Newman, but why it's probably time to go with Sean Ryan. So a lot of different things that you can check out, a lot of different perks. But if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure to do so on YouTube. You can hit join and you'll see all the different options out there for you. Vex, thanks again. If the offense, defense, and special teams are an issue, what is Matt LaFleur doing? I think, and I opened with this, I think it's the first thing we need to remember is this was going to be sort of this season, is that this is going to be an up and down season. And it's so easy as a fan, and he's even as somebody who analyzes the team, that when the team does well, oh my goodness, they're incredible. They're going to make the playoffs. They could maybe even beat a team. And as soon as they lose a game, it's like, oh my God, this team sucks, fire everyone. So try to stay in that middle ground, that even keel of like, all right, we know there's going to be ups and downs for this team. Let's look at the positives. Let's look at the negatives. What do they need to fix? What are the things that are going well? I think if you look at offense, defense, and special teams, you can find things that you are liking about each of them. I think there's a lot to like about the way that Jordan Love is playing, how Zach Tom's playing at right tackle. I think we haven't seen this full offense yet. This is the first time all season that we're likely to get a full complement of snaps from Jones, Watson, Dobbs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, that whole group finally all together. We could see Elton Jenkins and John Runyon Jr. and hopefully Myers and Zach Tom. And I think really this could be the first time you see this whole starting offense, sans Bakhtiari for Rasheed Walker. So, but I think there's still some positives to take away from some of the things we've seen, some offense, but a lot of negatives too. On defense, some positives. Rashawn Gary's playing out of his mind. Some of the young players are playing well, but a lot of things that need work. I think the red zone offense is another positive you can take away. On special teams, Anders Carlson, Daniel Whalen, some really positive performances from those two. But you've got some really dumb penalties, a punt return for a touchdown allowed. So we're just in that point where you've got a really young roster. There's some really good things. There's some really bad things. It's what we expected going in. Now you just want to see it trend in the right direction and this team start playing their best football as the year goes along. I think obviously Matt is the figurehead for the team, but he's pretty much like, this is Joe Barry's defense. This is, Rich Bisaccia's special teams and Matt LaFleur's offense. And then Matt's, responsible for the pulse of the team and all of those other things, the game day management and all of that. But if you're frustrated with the special teams, I would say that's more of a Rich Bisaccia thing. If you're frustrated with the defense, that's a Joe Barry thing. If you're frustrated with the offense, that's a Matt LaFleur thing. If you're frustrated with game management, timeouts, all of like game planning, how this team presents itself on a week-to-week basis, that's a Matt LaFleur thing. I don't think you can look at the special teams and defense and be like, man, Matt LaFleur sucks, because he does give a lot of autonomy to his coordinators in that situation. I don't think I'm being too negative, James. I think I'm just being realistic. Like I said, I think there's a lot of positives to see. Chatterhead's right there. The future is bright. This is what we signed up for. And James, maybe you're not talking to me. Maybe you're talking to somebody else, but what you will always get from me, whether you're talking to me or not, is what I see with my eyes, and try to be as realistic as possible and try to weigh out both sides. There's going to be some good. There's going to be some bad. There's going to be some positives. There's going to be some negatives. I know some people get really upset with me because they're like, you're both sidesing things. No, I want to both. Yes, I do. I want to both sides things. I want to show you the good. I want to show you the bad, the in between, and then let you guys decide for yourselves. And but I'm always going to tell you what I see, good, bad, or ugly. And if I didn't, I don't think you guys would probably like how I covered the team, because then I'm just wearing, rose tinted glasses and covering the team as a glass half full optimist. And that, I would rather just cover it the way that I kind of cover it, if I'm being honest. All right. Most hated Minnesotan, it's never as bad or as good as you think. Yes, except this past week's tape. This past week's tape was as bad as it seemed, if not worse at times. But they will bounce back. I have no question about that. But yeah, and more often than not, I do very much agree with you. All right. I probably got maybe 5-10 minutes left, guys, and then I got to get out of here. Also, my voice this week is starting to go a little bit from all the videos this week. Oh, I'm so happy somebody asked this question. All right. Delarose, might be saying that wrong. Do you think this defense might be better suited as a 4-3? Would that help the run defense, or does it not matter that much because we're so rarely in base D? You nailed it, Delarose. 4-3 versus 3-4 is maybe the most meaningless thing in the NFL right now. Now, if you want to have a conversation as to whether or not your edge players have their hand in the dirt or whether they're standing up, be my guest. I would rather have them standing up because you can drop them into coverage easier. It gives you more benefit of the doubt for what those players are going to do. As far as how your personnel packages, nobody's playing 3-4, nobody's playing 4-3. It's dead. Everyone's playing nickel. Now, do you see some base defense? Yes, of course, you see some base defense. Does that ultimately decide whether you're there are some really soft 4-3 defenses. There are some really intimidating 4-3 defenses. There are some really intimidating 3-4s. There are some really soft 3-4s. It has less to do with the 3-4 or 4-3. Like I said, ultimately, it just comes down to basically because you're a nickel 90% of the time. Do you want your edge players standing up or do you want their hands in the ground? And for me, I'd rather have them standing up. So I don't think it makes too much of a difference, honestly, at this point in the modern day NFL. True North, what a statistic. What a absolute statistic. Only team to play on both Canadian and American Thanksgiving this year. I think now we need to see if there's been any other teams in the history of the NFL that have played on both Canadian and American Thanksgiving, and what, do they go on to win the Super Bowl? Do they go on to get what does history tell us about teams that have played on both Thanksgivings? All right. Gary, do you see more dime inside the 5 this season? No, not inside the 5. We've seen some nickel inside the 5. Listen, it is really, really difficult. And we talk all the time about wanting to be a team that can live in multiple looks. There's a reason why a tight end like Sam Laporta is so valuable, because he can block as a legitimate blocker and he can be a receiving threat as a tight end. When you come out in 11 personnel, you're in, if you come out in a base defense, and even if it's goal line, if you come out in a base defense against 11 personnel, they're going to find a way to mismatch you and find something that they can pick on you at, even in, within the 8-yard line. So you got to come out in 11 more often than not. But they can run it down your throat if you're not ready to match up. And that's why my big thing this week has been, don't focus as much on 11 personnel, or like if you're going nickel or dime or whatever. What I want to see more is a concerted effort by Green Bay of getting the right people in the game at the right time. If it's a position where you're in the goal line, or at least in like the red zone, or it's like some 1st and 10s or some short yardage situation where it's more likely to be a run, I need to see more Kenny Clark, more TJ Slayton, more Preston Smith, more LVN, more Devondre Campbell when he's back, and those guys that can actually hold up against the run on early and obvious rundowns. I've seen far too much Kingsley Enagbare, Justin Hollins, Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, Isaiah McDuffie, mostly because he has to be. But I've seen far too much of those players on the field, a lot of times at the same time on obvious rundowns or in goal line situations. If you want to play your 2 safeties deep and you want to be able to hold up with a nickel against 11 personnel, if they're going to run the football, you can if you've got the right guys in the game. But if you're playing your 2 safeties deep and they're in 11 and you have Enagbare and Hollins and Wooden and Brooks and McDuffie in the box, you're just going to get it slammed right down your throat. And that's been a bigger issue. Like there'll be times too where like you got to stagger some of these players, because we saw against Atlanta, the Packers ended up with Enagbare and Colby Wooden next to each other for a huge chunk of that game. And Atlanta just ran at them every single time and they just got blown off the ball. Now, can you get by with maybe Colby Wooden and Preston Smith over here and TJ Slayton and Enagbare over here so that they're staggered a little bit more? Maybe. But like you can't have Wooden and Hollins or Wooden and Enagbare on the same side because you're screwed. They can't hold up as well against the run. So to me, it's a lot of everything. It's what defense are you playing? What players do you need when that defense is on the field? What are they playing? And, is it an obvious passing down? Is it an obvious rundown? Are you somewhere in the middle? All of those things have to be constantly under consideration. And to me, it's been far too lackadaisical with Green Bay, where it's like, all right, well, Preston is, it's time for him to come out. So let's put Hollins in. And are you talking to the defensive line coach to make sure that, all right, Hollins or Enagbare are in? We can't have Brooks and Wooden in, because that's the stuff that just gets your ass kicked on a Sunday when you don't have the guys that are able to hold up physically against guys like Penei Sewell in Detroit, who are just going to run it right down your throat if you've got the wrong guys on the field. So I think there needs to be a much better understanding of who's all on the field and what situations than there has been so far. All right, what else we got? Well, Ed, I will wear whatever color hat that I want. As many people will know, I wear a lot of different color hats. And most importantly, if anyone would like to question my fanhood because I'm wearing a different color hat, you can go ahead and question it. But there's a reason I cover it 365 days a year and have multiple audio podcasts and videos a day. It's because I love talking football. And if anyone's showing up to the Pack a Day podcast because of what I'm wearing or what I look like, you are in the wrong spot, my friend. If you want to come for analytical talk and breaking down the Packers, be my guest. If you have thoughts on, my neck beard or the hat that I'm wearing or my beautiful face, you're in the wrong spot. The modeling contract has not come quite yet. There's been a lot of different promotional opportunities that have come my way. Modeling has not been one of them. So if you're here for looks or fashion advice, you are at the wrong place, my friend. If you're here for Packer stuff, yeah, then we can talk. I like my pink hat though. So I recommend you get it. It's a great pink hat. You should look into it, Ed. All right. I'm going to probably answer one or two more questions. Oh, amazing. Thank you, most hated Minnesota. Most hated Minnesotan. I'll take any compliment I can get. If you're here for the looks and the fashion advice, you're in the wrong spot. Jared, but I appreciate it. Oh, you guys are the best. All right. Anyone else have any good questions? Everything goes with black or white in regards to caps. See, I've got a nice Packer picture in back of me. I wear Packer stuff like, I don't know, maybe 30% of the time. But like, if you're here for just me wearing green and gold every day, I can't do it. I'm sorry. Not going to happen. I should just have like all my hats lined up next time and just change it like every 5 minutes. True story. I ordered a brand new batch of Live Lucky hats and I got 5 of them in. And I thought one of them was like this really cool kind of like maroonish kind of color, but it had a really cool like offset. And I got it, and it was just pure Minnesota purple. And I'm like, well, F that. That's going right back. Not keeping that thing there. That is the one thing. I wore Lions blue this week. It happened. No big deal. I will not. You will never, ever, ever see me in purple on the Pack a Day podcast. So that's the one thing I will tell you. You will never, ever see me in purple. Never. All right. Oh, you guys are the best. All right, guys. I think that's probably going to do it. If we're on fashion advice and hat talk, we've probably exhausted our conversational abilities for the day. I'm going to finish my energy drink. You guys get your cheese curds and your beer drinking or whatever else you're drinking on. I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. We'll likely be doing the members only Q&A tomorrow. Got an episode with Ben Fennell coming out tomorrow. Did 3 episodes today. There's one out there with Carmen Vitale covering the NFC North. Mike Wall's episode is out there today. Also did a bonus episode for members only on Sean Ryan over Royce Newman and why it's time to go to Sean Ryan. Great audio podcast today out there as well with Monty and Nathan and Shanna discussing the key matchups and X factors for Packers and Raiders. So there is a butt ton of content for you guys. From a Pack a Day podcast standpoint, make sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe, check out those Pack a Day podcast memberships. I'll be right back here tomorrow. Go get yourself a pink hat. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.